He had spent 22 years building an empire no federal task force could crack, and then his own chief accountant stole $11 million and vanished to somewhere with a beach and no extradition treaty. That was the Tuesday Oona Hesp walked into his office with a coffee stain on her sleeve and a broken tote bag strap she'd knotted back together with an elastic band. She hadn't known who she was working for. That was, in hindsight, either the most honest thing about her or the most dangerous. The job had come through a consulting firm called Clear Path Solutions, which billed itself as a financial remediation service for complex private enterprises. Oona had been blacklisted from every legitimate firm in Vancouver after she'd reported suspicious ledger activity at her previous employer and discovered too late that her previous employer had been her firm's largest client and also the nephew of the managing partner. So she'd taken the ClearPath job. The contract paid triple her old salary. The NDA was 47 pages long and used the phrase material consequences with troubling frequency. She'd signed it anyway. Her credit card had been declined at the grocery store the day before. The estate sat on a cliff above West Vancouver behind 2 sets of iron gates and a driveway long enough that she'd had time to seriously reconsider her life choices by the time she reached the front door. The house was massive, grey stone, dark glass, the kind of architecture that said old money but meant something much less clean. A man who introduced himself only as Teague met her on the steps. He was built like a vending machine and had the expression of someone who hadn't smiled since the 90s. "You're the accountant," Teague said. "I'm the forensic accountant," Oona corrected, because she'd paid for that extra designation and she was going to use it. "There's a difference. One finds errors, the other finds people." Teague didn't react. He opened the door and gestured her in. The entrance hall was the size of her old apartment, which was saying something since her old apartment had been described by her landlord as cozy and by Oona as a crime. The floors were dark hardwood. The walls were hung with art she was fairly certain was original and therefore worth more than she would earn in her lifetime. She was patted down by a second man near the coat closet, a quiet, efficient search that turned up her phone, her USB drives, and a travel-size hand lotion she'd forgotten was in her pocket. "Do I get those back?" she asked. "The lotion," the man said and handed it back. She was shown into a study at the far end of the hall. She knocked because she'd been raised with manners, even if the last 18 months had largely eroded them. "Come in." Cillian Graff was standing at the window, not sitting. He stood with one hand in his jacket pocket, looking out at the grey Pacific spreading below the cliff. He wore a charcoal suit that fit the way expensive things fit. The burn scarring started at his left jaw and ran down beneath his collar. Clean lines, old damage, the kind of scar that had been years in the settling. It covered the left side of his neck and disappeared below the fabric. He turned when she entered, and she saw that the scarring continued up toward his left eye, which was partially occluded, iris clouded at the edge. He saw her register it. "The left eye has about 60% function," he said. His voice was even almost bored. "I mention it preemptively to save us both the awkward pause." "I appreciate that," Oona said. "I have a problem with awkward pauses. I fill them by saying something I later regret." He studied her for a moment. The study was neutral. "You're younger than ClearPath suggested." "ClearPath suggested I was a senior consultant. I am a senior consultant. Senior in commitment, if not in years." She set her bag on the chair nearest the door, a bag that was slightly more structured than the one she'd owned last month, purchased specifically for this meeting, still creased from the store packaging. "I also noticed 2 different bookkeeping systems in the preliminary files they sent me. Your previous accounts manager was running the legitimate business through a standard double-entry ledger and keeping a parallel record in what looks like a modified cash flow format designed to obscure the origin of about 30% of your quarterly deposits. It's actually elegant, as frauds go. I found it in 40 minutes. Graff went very still. "The files were sent this morning," he said. I read fast. Oona pulled her laptop from the bag. I also think he had help. The modification to the cash flow format uses a macro I've only seen once before, a boutique software firm in Calgary that closed 3 years ago. Someone taught him that trick, that someone is still in your organization. The silence in the study changed quality. You're telling me, Graff said slowly, that the person who helped steal $11 million from me is still in this house. I'm telling you they're still in your operation. Whether they're in this house is something I'd need access to payroll and communications records to confirm. She set the laptop on his desk. I'd also like coffee, if there is any. I drove up from Burnaby on 2 hours of sleep and a gas station granola bar. He looked at her for a long moment. She held the look. She'd learned in the past year that looking away first was a form of permission. Teague, Graff said without raising his voice. Teague appeared in the doorway, as though he'd been misted through it. Get her the access she needs, Graff said. And coffee. I take it with, Oona started. Milk, no sugar, Graff said. You're holding an empty granola bar wrapper and you've squeezed the end, which means you're trying to get every calorie out of it, which means you didn't eat this morning, which means you take coffee practical, not sweet. She looked down at the wrapper still in her hand. That's either impressive or invasive, she said. In my experience, Graff said, those are the same thing. She found the second set of books in 72 hours. She also found in that same 72 hours that Cillian Graff slept approximately 4 hours a night, drank his coffee black, and had absolute no patience for vague language. He wanted numbers, columns, conclusions. He spoke in the language of debts and returns, of what something cost and what it yielded, and he communicated with the men around him in that same precise currency, favors owed, risks calculated, loyalty weighted, and filed. It should have been alienating. Oona found it, quietly, the most sensible thing about him. She worked at the long table in the study most days, and he worked at his desk. They existed in a strange parallel silence for hours at a stretch. He would occasionally walk over to look at what she was doing. She'd become aware in the first day that he read very fast and retained everything. And she would occasionally look up to find him staring at a middle distance with the particular expression of someone carrying a weight that had become invisible through familiarity. You don't sleep, she said on the third night. It was past midnight. She was still cross-referencing transfer records. He had never left. I sleep. You sleep the way people say they're fine, she said. Technically true and entirely meaningless. He didn't answer that. She hadn't expected him to. It was the 5th night when she heard it, a low controlled exhale from the direction of his desk, the kind of sound a person makes when they're trying not to make any sound at all. She looked up. He was sitting with his left hand flat against the desk, his jaw locked, and the scarred side of his face turned slightly away from her. The burn damage, she'd come to understand, caused intermittent nerve pain. She'd seen him manage it in small, careful ways, the way he'd angle himself from direct light sometimes, or go completely still in a way that wasn't relaxation but control. Nerve pain, she asked. Irrelevant. To you, sure. To me, you're my client and you're in pain and I'm in the same room, so it's slightly relevant. She closed her laptop. Is there medication? I don't take it during working hours. It's midnight, Graff. I work at midnight. She pushed back from the table and went to the small cabinet beside the bookshelf that she'd already identified, through basic observation, as where Teague deposited the evening medications he pretended not to deliver. She opened it. There were 2 prescription bottles. She read the labels. This one, she said, bringing the correct bottle to the desk and setting it down with a glass of water from the carafe. The other one is a sleep aid. This one's just the nerve blocker. He looked at the bottle. He looked at her. You went through my cabinet, he said. I'm a forensic accountant. I notice where things are filed. She returned to her seat. You don't have to take it, but I'm going to keep working for another 2 hours, and I find it genuinely difficult to concentrate when someone 3 meters away is in pain and refusing to admit it. Most people don't notice, he said. Most people are probably trying not to. The silence stretched. The rain tapped against the dark glass. She heard the soft click of the bottle opening, the sound of water. She pulled her laptop back open and kept working. She didn't look at him. "Oona," he said after a while. The second ledger, the Calgary macro. Do you know who wrote it?" "I have a strong suspicion. I need 2 more days to confirm it." "Tell me the name." "Not yet." She kept her eyes on the screen. "I've been wrong before. I'm not going to hand you a name and have you act on it before I'm certain. Give me 2 days." He was quiet for a moment. "In my experience," he said, "people in your position don't say no to people in mine." "In my experience," she said, "people who surround themselves with yes tend to end up with $11 million missing." Another silence, then so quietly she almost missed it. 2 days. The problem arrived on a Thursday in the form of a man named York. Oona had been vaguely aware of York since her first day. He appeared in the estate's hallways with the particular frequency of someone who wanted to be seen, and he had the specific combination of height and tailored clothing and aggressive eye contact that men use when they want a room to understand they are important. He was Graff's second-in-command in all the ways that mattered operationally. He had also, Oona had noted in the payroll records, received an unusual bonus payment approximately 3 weeks after the chief accountant disappeared. She hadn't mentioned this yet. She was still building the case. On Thursday, York walked into the study while she was working. "I need the room," he said. He didn't look at her when he said it, which was how men like him communicated that they didn't consider you real. "I'm using it," Oona said. "Graff needs a briefing." "Then perhaps you could brief him somewhere else. This is a study. There are presumably other rooms." She turned back to her screen. "I'm in the middle of a reconciliation." York looked at her for the first time. The look was the one meant to make her feel small. "You're the temp accountant," he said. "I'm the forensic accountant retained to identify an $11 million fraud in your organization," Oona said pleasantly. "But sure, we can use shorthand." Graff appeared in the doorway before York could respond. He looked between them, reading the room the way he read everything, fast and complete. "York," he said, "we'll use the boardroom." "The men have been asking questions," York said, and he didn't move. "About the operation, about leadership. They're looking at the situation and drawing conclusions." "Then redirect their attention," Graff said. "I'm telling you what they're saying, that the losses last quarter were avoidable, that the accountant situation is an embarrassment, that bringing in an outside contractor to clean up the books." York glanced at Oona with the particular contempt of someone who wanted his contempt noticed. "Signals weakness. The Montreal operation is watching. If they think there's instability—" "There is no instability." Graff's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "There is a temporary audit, which is standard practice following a financial irregularity. And the irregularity itself is being resolved." York's jaw moved. He was doing math of his own. Oona realized not numbers but power. Some of the senior men are suggesting a restructure, a more distributed leadership model. Given. "Given what?" Graff said. The pause was very specific. "Given your current situation," York said, "the ongoing medical complications, the operational limitations." The room changed temperature. Oona had spent a week watching Cillian Graff contain himself. She knew the shape of it, the way his stillness went from relaxed to precise, the shift in his posture that happened when he was deciding something. She saw it happen now. He was deciding whether to respond. She stood up. "Sorry," she said. "I just want to clarify something." She walked around the table and stopped between York and Graff. She was shorter than York by a significant margin and did not care in the slightest. "What exactly are the operational limitations you're referencing? Because from where I'm sitting, I see a man who identified a fraud faster than anyone else in his organization, who is managing a complex financial recovery while running day-to-day operations, who reads 300 pages of financial records per day and retains all of it. She tilted her head. Which of those things is limited? York stared at her. This is not your conversation. No, but you're having it in my workspace. So, she crossed her arms. The medical complications you're referencing, the nerve damage, the partial vision loss, those are from the warehouse fire, yes? The one where your previous logistics head was later found to have had contact with the Montreal operation 8 weeks prior. She paused. I found that in the communications records, by the way. Yesterday. It's in my report. Funny how that keeps coming up, Montreal. The silence was extraordinary. York's face did something complicated. Those records are classified, he said. His voice had gone careful. I have full access to all records. It's in my contract. She smiled. But thank you for confirming you know which records I'm talking about. Graff looked at her. It was a brief look, very quiet. Then he looked at York. Get out, Graff said. York left. Oona stood in the middle of the room, aware that her hands were completely steady and her heart was hammering in a very unprofessional manner. You have his communications with Montreal, Graff said. I have records of contact between someone in your organization using an internal operations account and a routing number I've cross-referenced to a shell company registered in the same structure as the Montreal operations financial arm. She turned. It's not a confession, but it's a thread. And the warehouse fire. I don't know yet. Possibly coincidence, possibly not. She went back to her table. I have a name for you, but I need tonight. He was looking at her with the expression he wore when he was deciding something. You knew what that was, he said. In there, what he was doing. Soft coup. He's been laying groundwork. The payroll bonus, the communication with Montreal, the comments about leadership. He's building a case that you're no longer fit to run the operation, and then he'll present an alternative. She opened her laptop. It's a fairly elegant fraud, actually. He's running a parallel structure, just like your accountant was. Different asset, same methodology. You took a significant risk, Graff said, inserting yourself. You couldn't say what I said. If you'd pushed back on the medical limitations comment, it would have proven his point, that you're sensitive about it, that it's a vulnerability. I don't have that problem. I'm not part of your structure. I'm a contractor with nothing to lose, and a forensic accounting designation I paid $1,800 for, and I will absolutely use it to inconvenience people who need inconveniencing. Graff sat down. You paid $1,800 for your designation, he said, and a significant amount in student loans. Why? I was calculating, he said, what $1,800 of loyalty buys. It bought you one awkward confrontation. I'll invoice separately. Something shifted in his face, not quite a smile, more like the landscape of one, the geography of it. I'm sure you will, he said. The crisis broke at 2 a.m. Oona heard it before she understood it. A shift in the quality of the silence. A door closing on the wrong floor. Footsteps that moved with the careful deliberateness of people trying not to be heard. She'd been asleep for barely 3 hours in the room Teague had quietly arranged for her on the 2nd floor. She sat up. The power was still on. That was the first thing she checked. The second was that her laptop, which she'd left with the completed report open, was where she'd left it. She moved to the door, listened. 3 sets of footsteps, the direction of Graff's office. She made a decision she would later describe to herself as extremely stupid, and that she made in approximately 4 seconds, which was about how long it took her to pick up the heavy bookend from the shelf by the door and move into the corridor. What followed was not, in Oona's estimation, her most coordinated moment. She came around the corner at the wrong time, saw 2 men in York's employ attempting to get through the office door and through the bookend. It was a solid bronze thing shaped like a sitting bear, a Canadian bear, which felt apt, and it connected with the door frame above the first man's head and made a sound that brought Teague out of the shadows at the end of the hall, like something launched from a catapult. The next 90 seconds were loud and then abruptly quiet. When it was over, York was on the floor of the office with his hands behind his back and a look on his face Oona associated with people who had badly miscalculated. 2 of his men were detained in the hallway. Teague had a split lip and seemed pleased about it in a way she didn't fully understand. Graff was sitting behind his desk. He looked completely unruffled, which was either genuine or the most impressive performance Oona had ever witnessed. "You threw a bookend," he said, when she appeared in the doorway. "It was available," she said. "It's solid bronze. It weighs about 4 kilograms. "I know. I checked when I picked it up." She sat down on the nearest chair and discovered her legs had decided to stop cooperating, which seemed like a late reaction. "That's York's man on the left. I recognize him from the communications logs. He was copied on 2 of the Montreal exchanges. The other one I don't recognize, but I'd guess he came through logistics based on what York had access to." Graff looked at York. "The forensic accountant," Graff said very quietly, "found you in the records." York said nothing. "Teague," Graff said, "take him somewhere comfortable until morning. We'll have a longer conversation when the rest of the organization is awake to observe it." Teague took York somewhere. The office emptied. The rain had started again outside, a soft and relentless West Coast rain, the kind that didn't announce itself. Oona sat in the chair. Graff looked at the desk for a moment, then looked at her. "You have a cut on your forearm," he said. She looked down. She did. She didn't remember getting it. He got up, went to a cabinet, and returned with a small first aid kit. He set it on the desk in front of her and opened it without asking permission, which should have been annoying and somehow wasn't. "I can do that," she said. "You're shaking." "Adrenaline, it's physiological." "I know what it is." He sat on the edge of the desk, which put him at her level, and cleaned the cut with a measured efficiency that suggested he'd done this many times in many worse circumstances. The scarring on his hand was close now. She could see the texture of it, the years of it. He worked without looking at her face, focused entirely on the task. "You didn't have to come into the hallway," he said. "I didn't think about it long enough to talk myself out of it." That was also true in the study, with York. "I'm impulsive when I'm annoyed." "You're impulsive," he said, "when someone is being treated as less than what they are." She looked at him. He was taping a small bandage over the cut with the careful precision he applied to everything. He didn't look up. "I don't like it when things are misrepresented," she said. "It's an occupational hazard. I spend all day identifying discrepancies between what the numbers say and what the records claim. When I see it in a person," she stopped. "When you see it in a person," he said, "I find it difficult to leave alone." He looked up then. The scarred side of his face was toward her, and the light was low, and he didn't angle it away. She'd noticed, over the week, that he was less careful about the angling when she was in the room. She hadn't mentioned it because she thought mentioning it would make him self-conscious, and she didn't want him self-conscious. "The report," he said, "the one you finished tonight. It's complete. York is the primary internal source. He didn't set up the original fraud. That was your accountant working with Montreal, but he facilitated it and redirected a portion of the funds. The Calgary macro is traceable to a software consultant he engaged privately in 2021. I have the contract." She paused. "I also have what looks like correspondence, suggesting the warehouse fire was not accidental." The silence was very heavy. "That's in the report," he said. "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. She watched him absorb it the way he absorbed everything, not with visible emotion but with a stillness that processed. "You could have sent the report remotely," he said. "When you'd finished it, you didn't need to be here for any of this. ClearPath's contract says on-site for the duration of the engagement. You know that's not what I mean." She did know that. "The work isn't finished," she said. "There are 3 shell accounts in the Cayman structure that I haven't fully traced, and someone still needs to untangle the legitimate operating revenue from the funds that went through the parallel ledger Because right now they're mixed, and if your operation is going to be stable, you need clean books going forward. That could take months. Probably 6 weeks if I have uninterrupted access. He looked at her. 6 weeks, he said. Give or take. He stood. He put the first aid kit away. He stood by the window for a moment in the particular way he stood when he was deciding something, the Pacific invisible below in the dark. The rate, he said, would need to be renegotiated, extended engagement. Obviously. And the NDA. I'd want my own solicitor to review it this time. She stood, testing her legs, which had rejoined the team. The 47 pages were a bit theatrical. 49, he said. You miscounted. She stared at him. I did not miscount. Page 31 has 2 subclauses that each occupy a full page and are listed under the same number. It's 49. She opened her mouth, closed it. That, she said, is the most annoying thing you've said to me all week. The almost smile appeared again, and this time it crossed into actual territory, brief, real, reaching the corners of his eyes. Go sleep, he said. Teague will drive you to your car in the morning. I'll need remote access to the Cayman records by Monday. You'll have it. And coffee. Better coffee than what's been provided. The beans are mediocre. I'll inform the household. She picked up the bronze bear bookend from where it had ended up against the baseboard. She set it back on the shelf by the door, adjusted it so it faced outward. Good night, Graff, she said. Good night, Oona. She walked out. In the hallway, she stopped for a moment, her back against the wall, and exhaled the breath she'd been managing since the corridor. She had the job. She had the fraud documented, the traitor detained, and 6 weeks of legitimate work ahead of her. She also had a client who'd memorized the weight of bronze bear bookends, and noticed when she didn't eat breakfast and had, in the space of one low-lit and rain-soaked week, made the careful space of a study feel like somewhere she didn't mind being. That part she decided she'd put in a separate column, one she'd look at later. 6 weeks became 4 months. The Cayman accounts were, in fact, a labyrinth, and Oona was constitutionally incapable of leaving a labyrinth unfinished. She worked through November and into December, untangling ledgers and rebuilding clean records, and occasionally, at midnight, setting a prescription bottle on the desk without comment and returning to her laptop. She started keeping her spare laptop charger in the study. He started leaving her better coffee. The bookend stayed on the shelf. On the last day of the engagement, a grey Friday in December, snow coming in off the mountains, the kind of cold that made Vancouver briefly resemble the rest of the country, she presented the final report and set the last clean ledger on his desk. It's done, she said. Graff looked at the ledger. He looked at her. What comes next, he said, for you? Back to contract work. I have a referral from ClearPath, a logistics company in Calgary that needs a compliance review. She picked up her bag. Legitimate, this time. Boring, he said. Stable, she corrected, which I have not been for most of the past 2 years, so I'll take boring. He was quiet. He opened the ledger and looked at the first page. The summary she'd written in her particular notation, the numbers clean and ordered and complete. I'd like to retain you, he said. The engagement is finished. For ongoing financial oversight, legitimate structures, clean accounts, a proper compliance framework. He turned a page. You've already built the architecture. It would be inefficient to have someone else maintain it. You want to hire me permanently. I want to offer you a partnership arrangement, 30% stake in the above-board holdings. You'd oversee the clean operations, have full sign-off authority on financial decisions, and the standing to refuse anything you assess as non-compliant. He looked up. You'd have the authority to say no to me. She stared at him. You realize, she said, that is the most structurally unusual arrangement I have ever been offered. You're a structurally unusual person. The Calgary job pays well. The Calgary job, he said, is in Calgary. She looked at him. He looked at her. The snow was coming sideways against the dark glass now. The the Pacific somewhere grey and invisible beyond the cliff. "I'd need my own office," she said. "Not shared. I'm territorial about my workspace." Done. And a proper solicitor for the contract, not ClearPath's. Obviously. And better coffee than the last batch. It was an improvement on the original, but still not. "Oona." "Yes?" "The coffee," he said, "is from a roaster in Cillian that delivers weekly. I changed it based on your comments in the second week. You haven't mentioned it since." She opened her mouth. "I was being polite," she said. "You're never polite, you're precise, which means you noticed and chose not to comment, which means it was acceptable." He closed the ledger, the answer. She looked at the room. The dark wood, the window, and the snow. The bronze bear on the shelf where she'd put it back after the night that had changed the shape of everything, without either of them naming it directly. She thought about the Calgary job. She thought about her cousin's couch, about declined credit cards, about the NDA she'd signed without a solicitor, because she'd been desperate enough to stop caring what she agreed to. She thought about a man who'd said, "You're telling me the person who helped steal from me is still in this house," and hadn't lost his composure when the answer was yes. 35%, she said. 32. 34, final offer. He was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. 34, he said. She put her bag down. "I'll need the Cillian roaster's contact information," she said. "I want to order directly." The almost smile settled into something that wasn't almost anymore. "I'll send you the number," he said. Outside, the snow came down on the grey Pacific, and the iron gates and the long driveway where 4 months ago she'd arrived in a car that smelled like fast food and overdue anxiety, carrying a bag with a knotted strap and 49 pages of NDA she hadn't read carefully enough. 34% of something she'd helped build from the bones up. A room she didn't have to leave. She thought that was a fair exchange. She had always been good at calculating what things were worth.